Welcome to Vietnam True Crime. This is where we share real criminal cases that happened in Vietnam. Vietnam is known for its peace and safety, but like any society, it still has its darker side and stories worth reflecting on. Everything you hear here is based on the truth, nothing but the truth.
In the first episode of the Binh Phuoc Massacre series, one of the most horrifying cases in Vietnam's history, we revisit the murder of 6 family members in Binh Phuoc in 2015. The killer was not a stranger. He was once considered part of the victim's family. From a first glance came love. From sweetness and hope grew jealousy and resentment. And in the end, it turned into a plan for slaughter. What really happened? When a love ends, some choose to leave in silence, others cling to it with regret. But there are also those who choose to drag everyone down into the abyss with them.
Đêm đó bị cáo giết tất cả mấy người?
6 người.
Do bị cáo giết hay là ai?
Do bị cáo đâm.
July 7th, 2015, Minh Hung Commune, Chon Tang District, Binh Phuoc Province, Vietnam. A rural land of rubber plantations, sawmills, and red dirt roads. But that morning, the entire region was shaken. 6 members of a family were brutally murdered. The list of victims: Lê Van My, 48, owner of a timber workshop and animal feed factory. Nguyen Lê Thi Anh Na, his wife. Lê Thi Anh Linh, 22, their eldest daughter. Lê Quoc Anh, 15, their son. Du Ngoc To Nu, 18, a relative. Du Minh Vi, 14, a relative. Only one survived, an 18-month-old baby girl, the daughter of Anh Linh. The media would call it the Binh Phuoc Massacre. But before diving into the investigation, one crucial point must be emphasized. This crime was not born from money or robbery. It started with love. In those days of mourning, a young man was seen quietly attending the funeral. He lit incense, cried, and was even comforted by the victim's relatives. People affectionately called him the almost son-in-law. That man was Nguyen Hai Duong, 24 years old. He had once been the boyfriend of Anh Linh, the family's eldest daughter. No one suspected that the very person crying before the coffins was in fact the killer who had taken those 6 lives. The image would later be recalled again and again in the press. A murderer standing among the grieving, blending into the circle of sorrow he himself had created. And the haunting question remains: how could someone once in love become a sworn enemy? To understand, we must go back a few years. Nguyen Hai Duong was born in 1991 in An Giang Province. His family was poor. His parents divorced early, and he grew up lacking guidance. Later, he moved to Ho Chi Minh City to study and work. There he met Anh Linh, a girl from a well-off family, pretty, gentle, and academically stable. Their love began in high school and lasted for years. To their friends, they were a beautiful couple. Duong often drove Linh to school, took her out, and even visited her home. The My family knew him well. But young love rarely escapes conflict. Linh's family, especially her mother, Ang Ang, saw Duong as unstable, hot-tempered, and without a steady career. They disapproved. Coming from a wealthy family, they hoped Linh would choose a stronger, more established partner. In the end, Lin listened to her family and broke up with Duong. For most people, a breakup is an ending. For Duong, it was the beginning of a psychological downfall. After being rejected, he desperately tried to hold on, sending texts, making calls, even showing up at Lin's house, all to no avail. Lin was resolute. Disappointment turned to bitterness. With friends, Duong often complained of being looked down on, betrayed. His wounded pride grew heavier each day. In his mind, Lin's family were not just the reason for the breakup, they were the barrier that had destroyed his love. This distorted view turned pain into hatred. Instead of acceptance, John nurtured thoughts of revenge.
The most chilling part of this crime, it was not a spontaneous act. According to case files, Duong spent weeks preparing. He observed the family's routines, studied their house, and noted the layout of the bedrooms and gates. He bought knives, zip ties, gloves, masks. Everything was calculated. During this time, he persuaded two others, Tran Dinh Toai and Vu Von Tien. Toai initially agreed and even went with Duong to the family's gate, but when his wife called, urging him home, he withdrew. Tien, however, stayed, a close friend of Duong's, gentle and easily influenced. Duong told him it was just a burglary, no harm intended. Tien agreed. This would later spark debates. Was Tien an unwilling accomplice or complicit by silence? Either way, his choice bound him to an irreversible tragedy.
July 7th, 2 a.m. Duong and Tien climbed the fence, carrying weapons. The first person they encountered was Du Minh V, 14, sleeping near the gate. He was killed immediately to silence him. Step by step, they entered the house. One by one, the family members were tied up and subdued. Within hours, 6 lives were taken. Some pleaded, some screamed, but the killers showed no mercy. Anh Lin, once the girl Duong loved, watched as her parents, brother, and relatives fell. Finally, she too was murdered. Strangely, the 18-month-old baby girl was spared. Duong said, "She's Lin's child. I can't." A twisted form of mercy, proof that remnants of his love remained, but warped into something monstrous. After the killings, Duong and Tien stole some belongings and phones, then fled. In the following days, Duong played the role of an innocent mourner. He attended the funeral, wept, posted tributes on social media. To outsiders, nothing seemed suspicious. But truth cannot stay hidden. Within days, investigators uncovered the first clues. The circle of suspicion narrowed, tightening around Nguyen Hai Duong. Psychologists stress, Duong did not kill for money. The stolen items were secondary. The true motive was emotional vengeance. In criminal psychology, this is classified as murder driven by wounded pride and rejection. Such individuals often have impulsive personalities, poor emotional control, and see love as possession. When rejected, they convert love into hatred, seeking to annihilate not just the loved one, but everything associated with them. Duong's case shows how immature love, combined with lack of family guidance, can ignite into tragedy. We have retraced the journey from young love to simmering hatred, to the plan and the night that stole 6 lives in Binh Phuoc. It all began with love, but ended in blood and tears. In Episode 2, we will follow the investigators. What clues did they pursue? Why did they rule out a simple robbery? And how was the truth finally uncovered beneath layers of lies? Stay with us.
Bị cáo với Lê Thiện Linh có quan hệ tình cảm từ lúc tháng 10 2013 thì đến tháng 3 2015 thì Linh chấm dứt quan hệ tình cảm với bị cáo. Thì bị cáo nảy sinh ý định giết gia đình của Linh do bị cáo thù tức gia đình bà Nga. Bị cáo mua các hung khí.
Hung khí là gồm những cái gì?
Một cây súng bắn bi sắt, một con dao bấm, một cây súng điện và khoảng 10 sợi dây gút và một sợi dây vải. Bị cáo đem để trong ba lô. Bị cáo đầu tiên bị cáo rủ Trần Đình Thoại đi gây án. Sau khi gây án không được thì bị cáo rủ Tiến.
Cũng nói với Thoại vậy phải không?
Đúng. Thì bị cáo mới nói với Tiến là khi nào tao làm gì thằng nhỏ mày bịt miệng nó.
Nghĩa là khi đến chỗ thì bị cáo mới nói là cái ý định đó phải không?
Đúng. Bị cáo tính là dụ Vĩ ra mở cửa xong rồi giết Vĩ xong rồi vô nhà khống chế từng người.
Đêm đó bị cáo giết tất cả mấy người?
6 người.
Do bị cáo giết hay là ai?
Do bị cáo đâm.
You are now in Episode 2 of the Binh Phuoc Massacre series, a case that shook Vietnam, told from the perspective of criminal psychology. Episode 2, Tracing the Crime. The journey in which investigators followed every single trace and managed to capture Nguyen Hai Duong and his accomplices in less than 5 days. Morning of July 7th, 2015. Chon Thang Town, Binh Phuoc Province. Inside the villa of Mr. Le Van Mi, a major timber businessman, 6 family members were brutally murdered. Authorities immediately cordoned off the crime scene. Amid this tragic scene, one small detail deeply unsettled the investigators. An 18-month-old girl, daughter of victim Le Thi Ang Ling, was still alive, lying quietly in a room, thirsty for milk and exhausted. The question arose, why could the killer murder an entire family, yet spare the child? Major General Hu Si-tien, then director of the Criminal Police Department, C-45, spoke a sentence that later became the key to the case. No burglar would kill the whole family and then spare a baby. This shows it was not a simple robbery. Forensic work began that same morning. The perpetrators tried to erase their tracks, but a perfect crime exists only in imagination. Shoe prints. Many bloody footprints remained, size around 40-41. This indicated the perpetrator was male, of average build. Murder tools. Plastic cable ties, nylon gloves, common items, easily bought at the market. These were not randomly found at the scene, but had been prepared beforehand. Assets. A mobile phone was taken, but the safe and large sums of cash were untouched. This reinforced the conclusion that robbery was not the motive. The spared child. This was the golden detail, showing calculation, or at least some emotional connection between the perpetrator and the victim's family. Investigators concluded this was a premeditated crime tied to personal relationships. Who ever loved Mr. Mi's daughter? In every mass murder case, especially one with such cruelty yet sparing a child, the familiar question is always raised.
Did anyone in this family ever have a personal relationship, a conflict, or a love affair with someone? The suspect list was quickly narrowed. Employees who had been dismissed, business partners with disputes, and especially those who had once loved Mr. Me's daughter, Lê T. Ang Ling. One name soon emerged: Nguyen Hai Duong, 24 years old. He was An Ling's ex-boyfriend, had often entered the villa, once treated like family. But after the breakup, the relationship between Duong and her family gradually broke down. In the days following the crime, the funeral was held amid unbearable grief. Hundreds came to pay respects. Among them, Nguyen Hai Duong also appeared. He did not shy away. On the contrary, he acted too sorrowful, assisting with funeral arrangements, posting lamenting statuses on social media, such as, "I no longer have you." At first glance, this looked like a young man still in love, but to the seasoned eyes of investigators, it was an abnormal signal. Major General Ho Se-tien later recalled, "Those who truly grieve are often silent. Excessive weeping, overacting, sometimes that is performance." From that moment, Nguyen Hai Duong officially came under special surveillance. In the digital age, phones and mobile data often become silent witnesses. At the scene, an iPhone was missing. The technical team tracked its signal. The result, the phone appeared in Ho Chi Minh City, where Duong was renting a room. At the same time, Duong's call records were examined. His calls on the night of July 6th and early morning of July 7th matched the time frame of the crime. From there, investigators took the next step, secretly monitoring Duong. The shadow of an accomplice. Through surveillance, investigators discovered Duong was often accompanied by a friend, Vu Van Tien, who also worked at the timber workshop. Tien had always been gentle, quiet, with no criminal record, but recently he had become withdrawn and secretive. On July 9th, both Duong and Tien were summoned for questioning. At first, Duong remained calm. He claimed he was in Ho Chi Minh City at the time of the crime, with friends as alibis, but this contradicted his phone records. Meanwhile, Vu Van Tien, psychologically weak, could not withstand the pressure. Within hours, he broke down in tears, revealing abnormal detail. Tran Dinh Thuy, the third man. As the investigation expanded, another name surfaced: Tran Dinh Thuy, a friend of Duong. Thuy admitted he had once gone with Duong to Mr. Me's house to commit a robbery, but the plan failed and they left. Although he was not present on the night of July 7, his prior knowledge and preparation of a knife meant he could not escape the law. By this stage, the trio of suspects had been identified: Nguyen Hai Duong, Vu Van Tien, and Tran Dinh Thuy. The picture emerging. From the crime scene, traces, digital data, to suspicious behavior, investigators reconstructed the picture. Nguyen Hai Duong, the central figure, with deep personal motive. Vu Van Tien, manipulated, direct accomplice. Tran Dinh Thuy, indirect accomplice, involved in preparation. But at this stage, investigators only publicly stated, "The suspects have preliminarily confessed to the crime. The motive is still being clarified." Why did the truth surface so quickly? Within just 5 days, the case was solved. This was not only thanks to investigative skills, but also to psychological profiling of the suspects. Nguyen Hai Duong believed he could hide by playing the role of the grieving lover, but his overacting backfired. Vu Van Tien weak-willed, quickly collapsed under interrogation pressure, a common trait among manipulated accomplices. Tran Dinh Thuy, though not directly involved in the killings, his participation in preparation trapped him. The mindset of thinking oneself outside it often makes accomplices careless when confessing.
Toward prosecution. On July 13, 2015, authorities officially prosecuted the 3 suspects. The case of murder and robbery in Binh Phuoc entered a new phase, from investigation to trial. The entire nation was stunned. The public wanted to know, why could Duong kill the entire family who once treated him as their own son? Why did Tien, a man once known as gentle, become an accomplice? And in court, would they remain composed, or would they break down in tears before the looming death sentence? In Episode 3, The Trial and the Death Sentence, we will follow the entire courtroom drama, from the defense arguments, the tears of the victims' relatives, to the final pronouncement of the verdict. Toward prosecution. On July 13, 2015, authorities officially prosecuted the 3 suspects. The case of murder and robbery in Binh Phuoc entered a new phase, from investigation to trial. The entire nation was stunned. The public wanted to know, why could Duong kill the entire family who once treated him as their own son? Why did Tien, a man once known as gentle, become an accomplice? And in court, would they remain composed, or would they break down in tears before the looming death sentence? In Episode 3, The Trial and the Death Sentence, we will follow the entire courtroom drama, from the defense arguments, the tears of the victims' relatives, to the final pronouncement of the verdict. The crime took place in the night, but when dawn broke, the darkness that seemed to hide everything began to fade, and sometimes the first clue does not come from the murder weapon, nor from the bloodstains, but from a gaze too sorrowful, right at the victim's own funeral.
There was someone who once wept bitterly before the victim's altar, and another who insisted, "I did not take part." But when they stood before the court, what truth was revealed? This is Episode 3 of the Binh Phuoc Massacre series. In this episode, we arrive at the trial of the case, one of the hearings that drew thousands of followers across Vietnam. We will hear again how the indictment was read, how the cross-examination went deep, what the witnesses said, and how the defendants confronted each other in their testimonies. Will justice reveal everything?
The day the trial opened. December 17, 2015. The late-year weather in Binh Phuoc was chilly. From early morning, hundreds of people crowded around the Provincial People's Court building. Everyone wanted to witness the trial with their own eyes. Security was tightened. Thick iron barricades were erected. Riot police on guard. Every entrance was strictly checked. Around 8 a.m., the prison transport vehicle arrived. Nguyen Hai Duong, next to him, Vu Van Tien, and Tran Dinh Thuy. All 3 were escorted into the courtroom. The indictment read aloud. The prosecutor stood up, voice firm, reading the indictment for more than an hour. Nguyen Hai Duong, charged with murder under Article 93 of the Penal Code, with aggravating circumstances, multiple murders, murder of children, brutal conduct, careful preparation. Also charged with robbery. The indictment described step by step, from when Duong conceived the idea of revenge, lured friends, prepared weapons, until the night of July 7th, when 6 people were slaughtered. The courtroom was silent as death. Each victim's name read aloud, each detail of how they were killed sent shivers down spines. The day the trial opened, December 17th, 2015. The late-year weather in Binh Phuoc was chilly. From early morning, hundreds of people crowded around the Provincial People's Court building. Everyone wanted to witness the trial with their own eyes. Security was tightened. Thick iron barricades were erected. Riot police on guard. Every entrance was strictly checked. Around 8 a.m., the prison transport vehicle arrived. Nguyen Hai Duong, in a white shirt, thin-faced, head bowed, stepped down. Next to him, Vu Van Tien, small-built, pale, vacant-eyed, and Tran Ding Tuai, short, uneasy, eyes darting. All 3 were escorted into the courtroom. The indictment read aloud. The prosecutor stood up, voice firm, reading the indictment for more than an hour. Nguyen Hai Duong, charged with murder under Article 93 of the Penal Code, with aggravating circumstances, multiple murders, murder of children, brutal conduct, careful preparation. Also charged with robbery. The indictment described step by step from when Duong conceived the idea of revenge, lured friends, prepared weapons, until the night of July 7th, when 6 people were slaughtered. The courtroom was silent as death. Each victim's name read aloud, each detail of how they were killed sent shivers down spines.
When it ended, the presiding judge turned to the defendants. "Have you clearly heard the indictment?" All 3 mumbled, "Yes, we have." Interrogation of Nguyen Hai Duong, the mastermind. The first to be interrogated was Nguyen Hai Duong. Judge: "Do you admit to all acts as stated in the indictment?" Duong raised his head, eyes red, then bowed down. "Yes, I admit." The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Judge: "Why did you kill the entire family, including innocent children?" Duong choked. I only meant to take revenge. The family blocked my relationship with Ling. When it happened, I couldn't control myself. I'm sorry." Murmurs of anger rippled from the audience. Prosecutor: "You claim you couldn't control yourself, but you prepared knives, gloves, cable ties, and recruited others. Was that a spontaneous act?" Duong stayed silent for a few seconds, then nodded. "Yes, I did prepare, but at first I only intended to rob. I didn't think I would kill so many." Victim's family lawyer immediately countered. "To rob property, but prepare weapons so carefully, plan for a whole month, silence each victim, that is not robbery, that is premeditated murder." The atmosphere tightened like a drawn string. Duong kept his head low, saying nothing more. Vu Van Tien, the accomplice, drawn in. The second to be questioned, Vu Van Tien. Judge: "Defendant Tien, why did you agree to take part?" Tien trembled. "Your Honor, at first Duong said we were going to collect a debt, then to steal property, not to kill anyone. I was scared, but I didn't dare refuse. I didn't think the consequences would be this grave."
Prosecutor, sternly. Throughout the crime, you witnessed each victim being killed. Why didn't you stop him? Why didn't you run away? Tien's eyes filled with tears. I was afraid. If I ran, Duong would kill me too. I didn't dare.
Defense lawyer asked, "Did you directly kill any victim?"
Tien whispered,
"Yes, I did hold the knife, but under Duong's orders. I regret it deeply." Sobs broke from the victims' family seats. One relative jumped up, pointing. "Regret now? What good is that? 6 lives are gone." The judge had to bang the gavel, calling for order. Tran Tin Phuan, the one who withdrew. When called, Tran Tin Phuai stepped forward, stammering, I affirm I did not take part in killing. That night I only reached the gate. Then my wife phoned urging me home, so I left." Prosecutor pressed, "Did you know what Duong asked you to do?" Twy stayed silent, then said, "At first, Duong said it was a robbery. I did bring a knife, but I truly didn't think it would be killing so many." Judge, sternly, "You carried a knife, planned with Duong, even tried climbing the wall. That is preparatory accomplice. Leaving midway does not erase criminal responsibility." Twy hung his head, repeating only, "I beg for leniency. I didn't kill anyone." Witnesses and related parties. Witnesses were called. A worker from Mr. Mee's timber workshop stood, voice trembling. "On the night of the crime, I saw a strange young man near the gate. Later, I learned it was Dun Young. At that time, I thought he was just visiting Lin. I never imagined." A neighbor testified, "Around 2 a.m., I heard the dogs barking fiercely, then silence. I didn't dare go out. Only in the morning did I know. The whole neighborhood was shocked stiff." Most heart-wrenching, relatives of the victims were invited to speak. The mother of young Nhu stood up, sobbing. "My daughter was only 18, about to sit university exams. Did the defendants think of that? Did they think of the 18-month-old now orphaned?" The courtroom sank into sorrow. Cross-examinations. The truth gradually revealed. The trial moved into confrontation. Tian testified, "I was forced by Duong. I didn't dare resist." Duong countered, "No, Tian agreed from the start. At times he acted even faster than me." Tian burst into tears. "That's not true. I never wanted to kill anyone." The courtroom stirred. Twy firmly claimed, "I left. I did not participate." Duong pointed at Twy. He agreed too, even prepared weapons. If not for his wife's phone call, he would have done it with me. The clashing testimonies angered the spectators further. One side pushed blame, the other admitted but dodged. The judge closed the interrogation with this statement: "The defendants carefully prepared, fully aware their acts were unlawful, but still carried them out. Their blaming one another does not change the nature of the crime." Ladies and gentlemen, those were the tense hours at court, the heavy indictment, the cross-examinations, the witnesses' grief. The truth gradually unfolded, that this was not a moment of impulse, but a calculated crime with accomplices and preparation. But one question still remains unanswered. When facing the harsh sentence, what will the defendants say in their final words? In the final moments in court, when all truths had been laid bare, only one thing remained: the verdict. Hello, everyone. This is Episode 4, The Verdict and Public Opinion.
We will revisit the defendant's last words, the moment the court announced the sentences, and the reactions from the community. The last words, facing the truth. After the heated debates between the prosecutor's office, the defense attorneys, and the lawyers representing the victim's family, the presiding judge moved on to the final procedure, allowing the defendants to deliver their last words. The courtroom fell completely silent. Nguyen Hai Duong stepped forward first. His face looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. His voice trembled, but was clear. The defendant apologizes to Mr. Me's family and to everyone. Because of personal hatred, the defendant committed something unforgivable. The defendant does not expect forgiveness, only hopes to die soon to repay for what I have done. His words were distinct but brief, without any excuses. Perhaps Duong himself knew that from the moment he wielded the knife, his path forward had already been sealed shut.
Next was Vu Van Tien. He sobbed, his hands shaking uncontrollably. The defendant was wrong. Out of loyalty to a friend, out of fear, the defendant followed the path of crime. The defendant does not dare ask for forgiveness, only hopes the victim's family will show mercy, so that the souls of the victims may rest in peace. Many of the victims' relatives burst into tears. Some in the courtroom turned their faces away. Finally came Truong Dinh Thuy. The defendant admits being wrong for listening to Duong and helping prepare the weapons, but the defendant did not participate in the killing. The defendant hopes the court will show leniency. The moment of sentencing. At around 11 a.m., after the panel of judges withdrew for deliberation, all eyes were fixed on the door of the chamber. 45 minutes later, the presiding judge returned, holding a thick file. The tension was so high that many held their breath.
The judge read aloud, Nguyen Hai Duong, death penalty for murder, death penalty for robbery, combined sentence, death penalty. Vu Van Tien, death penalty for murder, 7 years imprisonment for robbery, combined sentence, death penalty. Truong Dinh Thuy, 16 years imprisonment for attempted murder, 3 years imprisonment for robbery, combined sentence, 18 years imprisonment. The sound of the gavel striking down, thud, closed one of the most shocking criminal cases in Vietnam at that time. Nguyen Hai Duong closed his eyes, exhaling as if surrendering. Vu Van Tien burst into uncontrollable sobs, nearly collapsing. Truong Dinh Thuy buried his face in his hands, trembling. In the victim's family section, many wept loudly. There were tight embraces, as if offering each other belated comfort, yet their eyes still carried an unerasable pain. The victim's family's reaction. Immediately after the trial, relatives of Mr. Me stated, "We know no verdict can bring back our loved ones, but the death penalty for Duong and Tien is just and deserved. This is the necessary justice."
The mother of victim Nhu choked up. "My child was kind, about to take the university entrance exam. Just because of an unfulfilled romance, the entire family was murdered. We hope for strict punishment so that no one else will suffer the same tragedy."
Another relative, in tears, said,
"The death penalty is appropriate, but this pain we can never forget for the rest of our lives. Every time we see the surviving child, our hearts break again."
Public opinion. The trial ended, but public opinion boiled over. Newspapers covered the case extensively. Social media exploded with debates. Some asserted they must be executed. Only death can repay the debt of 6 lives. Others reflected, the law has punished them, but the root issue, the lack of emotional control and distorted romantic relationships, is what's truly terrifying. Still others expressed regret. If society had more psychological counseling channels, if friends and family had noticed Duong's abnormal behavior earlier, could this tragedy have been prevented? Public opinion was divided into many layers, but all agreed this was a criminal case. This was a warning bell about the deep psychological abysses among youth when love turns into hatred.
The criminological and sociological perspective. Criminology experts view this case as a typical case study. Crimes committed by adolescents and young adults often stem from conflicts over love or money. When individuals lack conflict resolution skills and family support, they easily fall into extremism. The accomplice effect was very clear. With just one invitation, 2 other young men were drawn into the orbit of crime. From a sociological perspective, the case reflected a gap in educating youth about love, rejection, and the ability to let go. A gap in psychological support. No one recognized Zung's abnormal behavior, even though he showed obvious depression after the breakup. The responsibility of the community. Many people knew Zung still visited Mr. Mi's house, but no one raised alarm. So, the court's verdict sealed the fate of the perpetrators. But the story does not end here. After the first instance trial, there remains the appeal, the death row years, and the long-lasting social consequences. In the final episode, Episode 5, The Final Judgment Day, we will go to the very end, what truly remains after the death sentence is carried out. There are chapters of life not written in ink, but in silences, endless days of waiting between 4 walls, where time congeals like tar. When the gavel falls to close a trial, the law has spoken. This is Episode 5, the concluding chapter of the 5-part series on the Binh Phuoc Massacre case. Today we move through the days after judgment, appeals and appellate hearings, the journey of death row inmates, the execution, and the long-term consequences left behind for the community. After the gavel, petitions and a legal journey closed. Viet law provides a door after the gavel of a first-instance verdict, the right to appeal. In the first days after the initial trial, both Nguyen Hai Duong and Vu Van Kien filed petitions seeking a reduction from the death penalty. The reasons stated, sincere confession, repentance, and hope for a chance to live and reform. In July 2016, the Appellate Court of the Supreme People's Court in Ho Chi Minh City opened hearings for Nguyen Hai Duong and Vu Van Kien. Before the panel of judges, the files, evidence, the entire course of events, and the role of each defendant were reviewed once more. The result? The death penalty for both Duong and Tien was upheld, while Tron Ting Tuai received a 16-year prison sentence for complicity during the preparation phase of the crime and for prior assistance. From the appellate stage onward, the legal road for the 2 death row inmates effectively ended in court. Subsequent steps fell under the authority of execution of judgment.
Behind those dry lines of legal text lies a stark reality. When all legal hope is extinguished, time transforms into the time of awaiting execution. For most condemned prisoners, the psyche often moves through short but heavy phases, from fragile hope to despair, then gradually settling into the routine of prison life. A script repeated in many detention centers across many years. Not everyone shows it outwardly. Some become withdrawn. Some write letters. Some request meetings with a priest, a monk, or prison wardens for reassurance. The path of the condemned when each day becomes a countdown. In Vietnam, executions are currently carried out by lethal injection under Decree number 82/2011/NDCP, effective from November 1, 2011, later updated by Decree number 43/2020/NDCP, which specifies the drugs, facilities, and procedures. The core idea: instead of firing squads as before, lethal injection follows specified steps and drug components, ensuring standardized procedure while reducing the spectacle of public violence. The final weeks on death row are usually enveloped in a closed, orderly rhythm. Waking at fixed hours, eating, hygiene, labor, or regulated activities. Depending on the facility, inmates scheduled for execution may be allowed family visits under regulation, to write letters, or to leave final words. Even for crimes of extraordinary seriousness, minimum human rights remain guaranteed: the right to food and drink, basic medical care, and protection of life until the moment the law is carried out. In cases as grave as Binh Phuoc, the community often raises the same questions. Did they repent? Did they speak words of genuine remorse? In reality, remorse is a deeply private and inner experience. Not every apology convinces its listener, least of all the victims' families. Yet late-blooming regret is often seen when a person is forced to confront the consequences of their actions, with no detours left, no daily distractions to escape into.
The Final Judgment Day. On the morning of November 17, 2017, in Binh Phuoc, Nguyen Hai Duong was executed by lethal injection. The news was widely confirmed in the Vietnamese press, ending the long wait after appeal. As for Vu Van Chien, the community continued to follow. In 2018, domestic press confirmed his execution in Bình Giang. Thus, the legal process reached its conclusion for both defendants who directly killed 6 people on the night of July 7, 2015, after all levels of judicial review were completed and the execution procedures carried out. Normally, all of this happens in silence and formality. Outside, the community receives the news. On social media, some say justice has been done. Others sigh that nothing can compensate for the loss. Somewhere, the victims' families quietly light incense. Elsewhere, the family of the condemned folds away their child's letter, if there was one. After the verdict, circles of trauma. For the victims' families, the path of recovery, if it can be called that, is not measured by the days after court pronouncements, but by mourning's missing loved ones, by homes without voices, by chairs forever empty. Many studies and social work practices show that loss through violence inflicts complex trauma. It shakes the basic trust in safety and justice in life. Even when the law has spoken, pain has its own life, persistent, ineffable. For the defendants' families, another form of trauma: shame, indirect guilt, stigma. invisible sentences imposed by the community. They did not commit the crime, yet they must bear a heavy social identity. It is not easy to expect instant forgiveness from society, yet ethically, projecting the fault of one individual onto their entire family is something to be avoided. For the community, cases as grievous as Binh Phuoc shake moral compasses. How could it go that far? Such a question, repeated, creates collective unease. That is why severe sentencing is often seen by the public as a way of re-establishing moral order. When justice is seen to be strict, faith in the legal system, a form of spiritual security, is restored.
Lessons of prevention, from a love affair to a social tragedy. The Binh Phuoc case is not only a story of prosecution, trial, execution. From the angle of preventing violence born from broken relationships, several practical lessons emerge. Early recognition of signs of obsession, control, revenge in relationships. The shift from clinging to obsessive possession often comes with signs: stalking, threats, fabrications, isolating the partner from friends and family. Families, friends, schools, or workplaces need skills to recognize and channels for support, psychological or legal counseling. In Vietnam, cultural barriers of saving face and family matters should stay within the household often deter victims from seeking help, creating gaps where violence escalates. Habits of personal and community security. Families with economic means are often targeted. Habits like multi-layered door locks, alarm systems, cameras, nighttime rules, who comes home late, how to verify someone at the gate. The mindset of, "it's someone familiar, so it's safe," is a loophole many offenders exploit. Handling conflicts after breakups with a safe endpoint. When a relationship has reached its limit, clear boundaries should be set. Communicate only through traceable channels. Avoid meeting alone in isolated places. Let a third party know the schedule. If harassment occurs, report immediately to family and authorities.
The role of early intervention. Healthcare, education, and local police systems should have processes for receiving danger signals, such as guiding victims to document harassment, advising on legal preventive measures, commitment not to reoffend, official records, even restraining orders if law allows, and connecting psychological support services so both the victim and the perpetrator can receive assistance. From episode 1, we began with a shattered night when a broken love turned into the seed of hatred. Episode 2, the evidence spoke, criminal forensics, digital data, and investigative intuition peeled away the layers of deceit. Episode 3, before the court, cold confessions, belated tears. Episode 4, the verdict, a packed courtroom not only sentencing but embodying community moral values. And Episode 5, the final judgment day, closed the case. The Binh Phuoc case was horrifying not only because of the number of victims, but because it happened among people who once knew each other, once called one another family. The lesson that remains, and the reason why we tell this story, to protect life through understanding. That violence born of broken love can escalate very quickly if rationalized in the mind of an obsessed individual. That each of us, parents, teachers, friends, colleagues, can become an early intervention support. That respecting boundaries, proactively protecting oneself, and knowing when to seek help is not weakness, it is survival wisdom. Thank you for journeying to the end of this 5-episode series on the Binh Phuoc case. I am NW Host. See you again in the next series. The role of early intervention. Healthcare, education, and local police systems should have processes for receiving danger signals, such as guiding victims to document harassment, advising on legal preventive measures, commitment not to reoffend, official records, even restraining orders if law allows, and connecting psychological support services so both the victim and the perpetrator can receive assistance. From episode 1, we began with a shattered night, when a broken love turned into the seed of hatred. Episode 2, the evidence spoke, criminal forensics, digital data, and investigative intuition peeled away the layers of deceit. Episode 3, before the court, cold confessions, belated tears. Episode 4, the verdict, a packed courtroom not only sentencing but embodying community moral values. And Episode 5, the final judgment day, closed the case. The Binh Phuoc case was horrifying not only because of the number of victims, but because it happened among people who once knew each other, once called one another family. The lesson that remains, and the reason why we tell this story, to protect life through understanding. That violence born of broken love can escalate very quickly if rationalized in the mind of an obsessed individual. That each of us, parents, teachers, friends, colleagues, can become an early intervention support. That respecting boundaries, proactively protecting oneself, and knowing when to seek help is not weakness, it is survival wisdom. Thank you for journeying to the end of this 5-episode series on the Binh Phuoc case.